Before you read any further, drop your city in the comments. Doesn't matter where you are. Someone from your town is probably watching this right now, and they need to know they're not alone. And if this is your first time on Ivory's Secrets, welcome. Hit subscribe before the story ends, because I promise you, this one does not go where you think it's going. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. That detail matters. Because Marguerite Holloway had always believed that significant things happened on Tuesdays. Not Mondays, which announced themselves too loudly. Not Fridays, which were too eager to please. Tuesdays had a quietness about them, a kind of indifferent that made them the perfect cover for something that wanted to go unnoticed until it was already too late. The envelope was ivory, thick, cream-colored stock with a slight texture you could feel even through latex gloves, the kind of paper that cost more per sheet than most people's lunch. It had been placed on her desk at the Holloway Group's head office in downtown Toronto sometime between 7 and 8 in the morning, before her assistant arrived, before the elevators filled with people checking their phones, before the city fully woke up and remembered what it was. Marguerite did not open it right away. She set her coffee down, she took off her coat, she pulled the blinds on the floor-to-ceiling windows so that the CN Tower disappeared and the room went a shade quieter. Then she sat, and she looked at the envelope, and she understood. The way you understand something in your chest before your mind catches up, that whatever was inside had been a long time coming. She was 44 years old. She had built the Holloway Group from a single property acquisition in Mississauga into a real estate development, portfolio worth just over $2 billion. She had 3 degrees, a reputation for being the calmest person in every room she walked into, and a marriage that most of their social circle described as solid, which Marguerite had come to understand was what people said when they meant, "She doesn't talk about it." She opened the envelope. Inside was a single card embossed in gold inviting her to the Everyth Foundation's annual winter gala, black tie. Friday evening, the Fairmont Royal York, and in the bottom right corner, in ink that was slightly different from the printed text, added by hand, by someone who knew her actual handwriting would be recognized, were 4 words, "You should come alone." Marguerite read those 4 words 3 times. Then she placed the card face down on her desk and finished her coffee. She did not tell her husband. Tobias had been having an affair for approximately 2 years and 3 months. Marguerite had known for approximately 2 years and 1 month. This is the part where people always ask, "Why didn't you do something sooner?" And the honest answer, the one she would eventually arrive at, not in a therapist's office but in the backseat of a town car somewhere on the Gardiner Expressway at 11:30 on a Wednesday night, was that she had been waiting. Not out of weakness, not because she was afraid of being alone, not even because she still loved him, though she had once, in the way you love something you built from nothing and watched grow into a shape you no longer recognized. She had been waiting because she needed to know how far he would go. Tobias Ashworth, her husband of 16 years, and yes, you read that correctly, the same Ashworth as the foundation on that ivory card, had not simply taken a mistress. He had, over the course of those 2 years and 3 months, systematically begun to redirect assets, small amounts at first, consulting fees to a numbered company she didn't recognize, a renovation contract for a property in Collingwood that didn't exist, then larger amounts, then a transfer that moved a figure she would not say out loud into an account she found, only because she had been, for the entirety of their marriage, the one who actually read the statements. Tobias was charming and well-liked and profoundly careless with details. He believed she trusted him completely. He believed this because she had never once given him a reason to think otherwise. That had been the plan. The woman's name was Doriane. She was 31, worked in event production, and had the specific kind of confidence that comes from never having been seriously tested. Marguerite did not hate her. She had decided early on that hating Doriane would be a waste of energy that could be directed elsewhere. What she felt, when she thought about Doriane, was something closer to a kind of distant, professional disappointment. The feeling of watching someone bet everything on a hand they haven't fully looked at. She told Tobias she would attend the gala with him. He seemed pleased, relieved, even in the way that people are relieved when they've been waiting for a problem to fix itself, and it appears, briefly, to have done so. He kissed her on the cheek and said it would be a wonderful evening, and that she should wear the blue dress, the one she'd worn in Geneva, and Marguerite smiled and said she'd think about it, and went upstairs and stood in front of her closet for a long time. She wore black. She always wore black to things that mattered. The Fairmont's ballroom had been transformed for the occasion, in the way that expensive events transform expensive spaces, by spending a great deal of money to make everything look effortless. White orchids in arrangements so tall they brushed the chandeliers. Champagne moving through the room on trays at a pace that suggested abundance without excess. A string quartet playing something modern, enough to seem current, but classical enough to feel safe. Marguerite noticed all of it and retained none of it. She was watching the room the way she had learned to watch rooms. Not for what was immediately visible, but for the architecture of it, who was standing near whom, who looked up when someone new entered, where the sightlines were. Tobias was at her side for exactly 11 minutes before he was pulled away by a cluster of board members near the bar. And she let him go with a hand briefly on his arm and a look that said, "Of course, darling, I'll find someone to talk to," which she was very good at performing, and which she had needed less and less as the years went on, because it turned out that she genuinely could always find someone to talk to. She was, despite everything, excellent at rooms. She took a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray. Across the ballroom, she spotted Dorian. She had not expected that. Or rather, she had considered it as a possibility and assigned it a low probability, because bringing your mistress to your wife's family foundation gala was a particular kind of recklessness that she had not thought Tobias capable of. She revised her estimate upward. Dorian was wearing a dress the color of champagne, which Marguerite noted was either a coincidence or a statement. She was standing near the east entrance with a small group of people Marguerite didn't immediately recognize, laughing at something, one hand touching the arm of the man beside her in a way that looked practiced, but not quite natural. Marguerite drank her water. She did not move toward her. She did not look away. She simply watched, with the same quality of attention she brought to quarterly reports and acquisition meetings, and she waited. The person who found her first was Tobias's mother. Lorraine Ashworth was 73 years old and had spent the better part of 5 decades navigating the specific social ecosystem of Toronto's philanthropic upper class. She had outlasted 2 recessions, 1 scandal involving her late husband and a land development deal in the early 90s, and 3 attempts by the foundation's younger board members to modernize its governance structure. She was small, sharp-eyed, and had the kind of posture that suggested she had decided sometime in her 50s that gravity was optional. She appeared at Marguerite's elbow without any warning and said, quietly, "You came. I always come to the gala," Marguerite said. "Not alone, you don't." There was a pause. Marguerite looked at her. Lorraine was looking at the room. "I know what's been happening," Lorraine said. She did not elaborate. She didn't need to. "I've known for some time. I want you to understand that what happens tonight was not my doing in its entirety, but I did not stop it either, and I think you deserve to know that before it happens." Marguerite considered this. "How long?" "Long enough to have consulted people I trust." A brief pause. "The foundation has its own interests to protect. He has not been careful with the distinction between his personal business and the family name." "No," Marguerite agreed. "He hasn't. There's a moment coming," Lorraine said, still not looking at her. "In about 40 minutes, I think, though these things are never exact. You can leave before it if you want." "I would understand." Marguerite thought about the envelope on her desk, the ivory card, the 4 words in different ink. "I'll stay," she said. She picked up another glass of sparkling water. 43 minutes later, Tobias made a speech. This was not on its face unusual. Tobias was a natural speaker, warm, self-deprecating, in a way that felt genuine, even when it wasn't, capable of making a room feel like it had been specifically gathered for the pleasure of his company. He thanked the foundation's donors. He spoke about the work of the past year. He told a story about his late father that Marguerite had heard perhaps 30 times, and that still, in the telling, managed to produce visible emotion in the people hearing it for the first time. And then, near the end of the speech in the section where he usually thanked his wife for her support and her patience and her steady presence, he paused. It was a small pause. Most people in the room would not have noticed it. Marguerite noticed it. He thanked the team. He thanked the board. He raised his glass to the foundation's future. He did not mention her. Marguerite did not change her expression. She stood with her water and she thought, there it is, not the beginning, not even close to the beginning. But the moment he had decided, she was already gone. That was useful information. What happened next took approximately 8 minutes and was, in terms of its structural elegance, something Marguerite would later describe to exactly one person, her younger sister, on a phone call that lasted until 2 in the morning, as almost beautiful in the way that certain legal documents are beautiful. Not warm, not gentle, but precise. A man she had never met introduced himself to Tobias at the edge of the stage. He was carrying a portfolio. He was not from the foundation. He was not, as it turned out, there for the gala at all, though he had clearly been in the building for some time. His name was Martin Calloway, and he was a forensic accountant from a firm that Marguerite would later learn Lorraine Ashworth had retained 11 months ago. Tobias shook his hand. Tobias's expression, when Martin Calloway said his name and his firm's name and the reason for his presence, went through 3 distinct phases. The first was confusion. The second was something that Marguerite recognized from across the room as the particular look a person has when they realize that the ground they were standing on has simply stopped being ground. The third was a very fast, very controlled return to a neutral expression, which he had learned from her. She realized, or had always had, and she had simply not seen it deployed against her interests before. He excused himself from the small group he was standing with. He looked for her. She was standing exactly where she had been, all evening, 15 feet from the bar, glass of sparkling water in hand, watching. Their eyes met. Marguerite did not smile. She did not look away. She simply held his gaze across the ballroom, in the middle of 200 people who had no idea what was happening, and she let him see that she was there and had been there, and was not going anywhere. He was the one who looked away first. She did not speak to him that night. There were lawyers present by the time the gala entered its final hour, which was an unusual thing for a gala, but this was an unusual evening. 2 of them had been at the foundation for years. One was from her own firm, someone she had called 3 months ago, on a Wednesday afternoon, from a park bench on the waterfront, speaking quietly into her phone, with her collar turned up against the October wind. The trust documents were what mattered most. Marguerite had signed the original agreement when she and Tobias had married, which most people in their circle knew. What most people did not know, what Tobias, specifically, had failed to notice in the years of paperwork and amendments and quarterly filings, was that she had quietly, legally, and with the full cooperation of her personal legal team, restructured the underlying trust twice in the last 4 years. The Holloway Group was not a joint asset. It had never been a joint asset, not technically, not in any way that would survive a serious examination. Tobias had believed otherwise because she had allowed him to believe otherwise, and because he had never, not once in 16 years, sat down and read a document she had prepared with the same level of care he applied to his own. She had not lied to him. That was the thing she needed to be clear about later to herself. She had not forged anything, had not deceived anyone, had not done anything that couldn't be found in a filing somewhere. She had simply organized her affairs with a precision that he had neither the patience nor the interest to match. The property in Collingwood that didn't exist? Flagged by the forensic team. The consulting fees? Flagged. The transfer she had found on a Wednesday night? Flagged, traced, documented in a report that was now sitting in a portfolio in the hands of Martin Calloway, who was a very calm man doing a very calm job. Dorian left the gala at some point before the lawyers arrived, which Marguerite thought was probably for the best. She did not know exactly when. She had not been watching. Lorraine found her again near midnight in the wide corridor, outside the ballroom, near a window that looked out over Front Street. The city was doing what the city always did at midnight, in December, glittering at itself, indifferent, to everything below. "Are you all right?" Lorraine asked. It was a question Marguerite had been asked many times over the past 2 years by people who didn't know what they were actually asking. This time she thought it landed differently. "I don't know yet," she said, which was the most honest thing she'd said to anyone in quite a long time. Lorraine nodded. She did not offer platitude, which was one of the things Marguerite had always respected about her. They stood for a moment in the corridor, two women who had built very different things over very different decades, listening to the muffled sound of the string quartet finishing its last set. "He'll contest it," Lorraine said. "Yes, it'll take a while. I know. You have good people, very good people," Marguerite said. Another pause. Below them a streetcar went by, orange and slow. "I'm sorry," Lorraine said, "for my part in for the years it took." Marguerite looked at her. She thought about what it would feel like to be angry at this woman. She reached for that feeling, and found it wasn't quite there, or wasn't the shape she expected. "You came down on the right side," she said. "That counts." She took a cab home that night, not a car service, just a regular cab she flagged on King Street, which she hadn't done in years. She sat in the back seat and watched the city go by and let herself, for the first time in a long time, feel the full weight of what was over and what was beginning. It wasn't peace. Not yet. There was too much ahead for peace: the legal process, the financial untangling, the conversations with calls, and the calls from people who would not know which of them to be loyal to. There was the house she would need to decide what to do with, the Collingwood place she had actually loved, before she found out what he'd been doing with the accounting. There were the friends who were really his friends, and the ones who were really hers, and the large and uncomfortable middle category that would resolve itself only over time. There was the particular loneliness of being the person in the room who knew the most and said the least for the longest. She was acquainted with that loneliness. She had been living inside it. But there's a difference between carrying something in private and setting it down in a room full of people who can finally see it. And tonight she had done that, and there was a particular exhaustion that came with it that wasn't entirely unpleasant. The cab pulled up to her building on Bloor. She paid in cash, which she never did, because she wanted the small physical transaction of it. She thanked the driver. He said, "Have a good night," and she said, "I think I will," and meant it in a way she hadn't expected to mean anything for a while. She went upstairs. She poured herself 2 fingers of the scotch she kept in the second cabinet, the one Tobias had never found because he didn't drink scotch. She sat down in the chair by the window, her chair, the one she'd owned before they married, that had somehow survived every move and renovation, and the 3-year period when Tobias had suggested politely that it didn't really fit the aesthetic of the living room they'd designed together. It was an ugly chair objectively, worn arms, slightly crooked on the left side. She had refused to get rid of it every single time, without ever fully explaining why. She understood why now. Some things you keep, not because they're beautiful, but because they're yours. And you need to remember, on certain evenings, what yours actually feels like. She sat in the chair and drank her scotch and let the city be quiet around her. And for the first time, in 2 years and 1 month, she stopped waiting. There was nothing left to wait for. The room felt different without the weight of that. Lighter, in a way that wasn't quite happiness, but was something she thought she remembered from a long time ago, before she had learned to carry so much, without letting anyone see. She did not sleep for a long time. She didn't mind. 3 months later, her assistant set a document on her desk without comment. Marguerite read it twice, signed where indicated, and handed it back. The Holloway Group issued a press release that afternoon confirming the appointment of its founder as sole executive trustee and chair of the board, effective immediately. It was a largely administrative announcement. It contained no personal details. It was, in the language of these things, intangibly unremarkable. Marguerite was at her next meeting before the release went out. The window behind her desk faced east. On a clear morning, you could see all the way to the lake. This was a clear morning. She looked at it for exactly 4 seconds, the way she had learned to take things. Briefly, completely, without letting herself look away too soon, or hold on too long. Then she turned back to the room, and got on with it.